Greetings, and welcome to the 80 Level Roundtable podcast. In each episode, host Kirill Tokarev invites video game industry leaders to talk about the world of game development. No topic is off limits as long as it relates to video game development. New episodes are in the works, so remember to follow us or subscribe and share with someone you know will also enjoy the podcast.
We want to talk a little bit about a very interesting topic of music in games. Actually, this is not something that is covered extensively, and it feels like often the topic of kind of working on your music and working and composing and building a soundtrack is something that you do after you build the game, right? So this is more like an afterthought for a lot of developers. So hopefully our conversation is going to fix that and that people will start thinking about it earlier. But
let's hope.
before we kind of go into the nitty gritty, can you do like a little introduction, Kristofer and Andreas? Tell us a little bit about your company. How long have you been doing this? What's your background and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I will try to make it short. There's a long story about it. Make it short. I'm a composer, and I started do my first gig as a composer for games was back in, was it 2013 or something like that. And having an education in direct music producer earlier, I thought that this was going to be a real awesome, cool, adaptive game music. And we were three composers. And I realized it was kind of an awakening for me to see that, okay, we're not thinking about adaptive music at all. We're just doing really great symphonic music with a real symphonic orchestra, but it has nothing to do with the game. So at that point, I decided to do something about this, and I made demos, and I needed a prototype, so I called Philip Benefal, my co-founder of this company, that actually made a prototype that we showed for Arrowhead, that was making a Warner Brothers game called Gauntless. And we didn't know much about how things were going with the engine and so. And suddenly we just got a call and it said, "Yeah, we're on E3 now, and everyone can play the game and so on." And we were like, "Okay." And does the engine it didn't break? And they said, "No, I think it's the only thing that hasn't broken down yet in this game is your engine." And that was kind of the start for Elias Software. So then we knew that we need to make a company out of this. So we started the company around 2014, 15, and focused entirely on adaptive game music. With, you could say, it was mainly my thoughts of how the tech needs to be for a truly adaptive score. For me, I realized that there's no tech at all out there that can do this. So we did the Elias 1, 2, and 3, and so on. And we were a small startup. Recently, we got funded, and we're growing really fast. And I don't know, Andreas, when you jumped on, was it like 3 years ago, 4 years ago?
Late 2017,
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
So it's been a little while.
Yeah, because there's a story. My co-founder, Philip, is kind of a programmer genius, number one, and now we have Andreas, programmer genius, number two. So Philip was making games for blind people since he's blind himself. And quite early in this company, we realized that we don't only have to solve the tech, the possibilities, and so on. We don't. That's of course number one, but we also need to change the whole workflow. We need to bring back the control to the composer and so on. And that is why I really needed Andreas to, not only for the UI and so on, but he's more familiar, of course, with the graphical UI and all of that Philip really can't do. Since
Christopher, Andreas, thank you for the intro. Before we kind of go into like the software itself, can you explain maybe the difference? So if there is like an adaptive music, and then there is music that you see like in your demo, you have like music from Marvel films. So what is the difference between music in a movie, basically, and music piece in a game? Like, how are they different? What are like the main things that kind of differentiate?
For me, it's like when you see a movie, when you score a film, for instance, you can do it extremely detailed, and you, as a composer, you can really strengthen all the feelings in the movie. I often say that if people asks about the music after they've seen a movie, and what do you think of the music, and the other guy says, was it music in the film? Then that's the goal. That's the aim. Then you know that you have succeeded. In games, that has never been the case, sadly, because the tools you have for putting music in games has been so almost only relied on crossfades and things like that. Really, what do you call it? Not too deep. You don't have the detail, and so with Elias, the things that I wanted to solve was one thing. For instance, motifs. I love motifs in movies. I love when you look at, I don't know, Star Wars and Darth Vader and enters the
Kristofer, explain what is a motif, like, so the audience really understands.
So motif. If you think of a scene in Star Wars where you already have music, there's music going on, and then Darth Vader enters the scene. Then his theme will work on top of the already written score. So his ba 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 bo ba ba bo ba ba will work, of course, because it's super easy to do that in a movie. But what happens if you're in a game and you have the music and you don't know how the player will play this game, so you really don't know when Darth Vader is going to enter. So I thought this was kind of the holy grail for me to solve. And we did this quite early in Elias with something we called tonal motifs. And you have versions of the motifs that will work on different places in the music. But from the programmer's perspective, they just print play Darth Vader to simplify it. And Elias will take care of the rest. The engine will choose the right version and so on. So this is one thing. The other thing is when I teach composing for film, there's one thing that is very common, and you do Mickey Mousing. It's like when you comment too much of the film. And the reason the term, the name is Mickey Mousing is, if you look at the old Pluto films and so on, when every step Pluto takes has a trombone or something like that. So when he walks, it's like wop 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 wop, and that is an effect. But if you do it in another movie, it wouldn't work in like Inception or whatever movie. Then it's an error, and then you talk about, oh no, it became Mickey Mousing here. In games, I've never heard of that because it's so hard to do it. So when I talk about making music for games, and people say, oh, what about, isn't it going to be too much Mickey Mousing if the music is adaptive? I often say, well, call me when that happens, because then we've reached the goal. then we know we have to back a bit. So it's the main difference with writing music for a movie or for a game is that a movie is linear. It's actually easy. Anyone can make music for a movie, actually. For a game, you have to rely on the tech. You have to think completely different, because the story isn't played yet.
Yeah, so I think this is my next question is more like for Andreas, but feel free to kind of contribute together. So the adaptive music is something that actually developers were trying to do in games for a while. So this is not something that you're kind of bringing in and it's completely new, because I know like even at the beginnings of first 3D games, even before Quake and Doom and all those, there were examples of composers and sound producers to trying to kind of adapt the music and change it depending on the turn that you make and the context that's inside the frame. But those were very old games, very primitive. I'm wondering if you can kind of explain how does it work with modern titles, and maybe talk a little bit about the amazing demo that you made where wherever you look, the guy starts singing. So some would say that it's all scripted and it's just like a bunch of scripts kind of like in a row, but maybe you kind of go more about the details and explain how does it work and how can it be kind of like leveraged to build your own score for the game and make it truly adaptive.
First of all, you're onto something, because you said that there's been a lot of examples of this in the past, and that's completely true. Everything before PlayStation 1 was adaptive, because the only thing you could do with music back then was to make it adaptive, because the sounds weren't actually there. You couldn't amaze people with the sounds. With PlayStation 1, with the first the CD and so on, you can have real music, if you will, so not synth MIDI based music. So it's been kind of the dark ages for adaptive music for a while since then. And for me, with Elias, I wanted to have the same quality. I wanted to use real music. In my case, it was a real symphonic orchestra in my first game, to make that adaptive. But with that said, we also brought in MIDI in Elias. You can do it the old-fashioned way with the sound libraries as well, and that is even more adaptive, of course, because you don't have to think about crossfades and things like that. But so some of the things Elias brings to the market is actually not that new for people that remembered the 90s. The difference is we do it with real audio and real music, and in the 90s we did it with MIDI and synths. So in the demo level that we released today, we wanted to show this. We have a lot of demos in this level. We have one, Martin Barreby, my favorite composer in the world, who works for us, made an amazing adaptive demo for one of the levels. But the other level that you are talking about now, we want to really show how adaptive it can be, and we have this bard guiding us through the level. So every time, if you look at something and you want, in this case, if you're on, you walk into the level, you want this guide to see that there's actually a treasure under the water. So this bard will say, sing. Why don't you go and look for the treasure? I think you want that. And if you just jump in the water, he will say something, sing something sarcastic, like, I don't think you have gills. I think you need air to breathe, and so on. So he will taunt you a little bit, but he will help you, and you will know that, okay, I need to find some equipment to dive and take the treasure. And I think this is the first demo level. Normally, when we do demos, we always talk and do tutorials, and we explain what is happening and so on. We don't need to do that here, because we actually have. And the funny thing is, the guy singing it is Philip, my co-founder. So it's his voice. But it will work anytime. Also, if you just stand still, the bard will remind you but hey, aren't you gonna find some money so we can play in this dice game and so on? So this demo that we did was more showing exactly that, flaunt the new feature of Elias. And the other demo that Martin did was more like, this is how adaptive music should sound, because it really sounds like any movie, and it sounds like it's written completely for your way of playing it.
So, and how is this? How is it integrated into the game? Like,
Yeah, that's a
can
great.
you tell us, like, how do you assemble it, and how do you actually put this into the game so it all mixes together?
Yeah, and now soon I'm gonna need you, Andreas, but I can start.
Please start. We'll
Yeah,
help
yeah.
out.
So Elias
Yeah.
3, it's have things from Elias 1 and 2 and so on. So it's an event-based system. So you place triggers in the game that says to Elias, play this and play this. The great thing with Elias 3 is that you can also say, play this action preset. And an action preset is a chain of events. The longest action preset I've done just for testing it was like 5 hours or something like that. Elias just did things. But the new Project Harmony that we're working on is another thing. Maybe you can explain that, Andreas.
Yeah, I mean, for the I think one point, Kristofer, is that also I think with the workflow. So when it comes to the music, that the composer can really, complete the compositions up front before the integration, which is a very nice thing. So I just want to comment a little bit on the music system, and then for the integration, this engine has a very very natural and easy API for the deep integration that anyone would like to use. But we also have plugins for game engines. So for Unity and Unreal Engine, we have plugins which makes it super simple to integrate. And obviously there is a flow of the content when you do packaging or cooking of the game and so on. So it's a natural flow from the content creation to the integration, so to speak, and the tech itself is rather straightforward to integrate. For the audio system, it follows a somewhat similar setup, although the audio system is say the use cases of it and the kind of expectations of it are much wider. So there are much more you might want to do over an API and so on. So we're trying to provide different kinds of interfaces, but there's of course what we call the runtime API, which is usually what you integrate from the game engine. But there's also content API where you can make your own toolings towards the engine, and there's an extension API if you need to extend the product as well. So and for the audio system also comes with plugins for the popular game engines. So
I have a question.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry to interrupt. I mean, I really liked your explanation about the events and how do I say this? So there are limits to the control, how the game developers can control what the player sees, right?
Yep.
There's a lot of like external and internal tools that they can use. So for example, they can attract your attention with something like shiny as you have in the level, be more forceful, and they can take the camera out of your control and just put it at the scene or like the set piece that you really need to see. And this is where they kind of push with the music, this is when they want like a strings or whatever, like depending on what the mood is and all the other stuff. But I'm really interested in this idea of event based things. Basically it and feel free to correct me if I understood wrong. basically that if something's happening in the game, if the player is in a position somewhere, or the player is in a position and performs a certain action, some kind of music is being played. Is this
Yeah.
the correct way to approach it?
I can try to explain it this way. If you start a car in the game, you will want it to be very instant. It's a sound effect that you want to be. Now I'm starting the car. Then if you're going to drive this car, you want everything to be instant. You would like the gas pedal to react directly and so on. With music, it's not always like that. So you could say that the difference with the music is that instead of just forcing the music to change to something else, you're actually acting like a conductor. You're telling the music to, now you need to change. And maybe the percussion is really fast, so they will change directly. But maybe the string tracks will almost say to you, yeah, we're going to change really soon. We just have 2 lines more to play or something like that.
Mhm.
So as a composer, you can have control over the music in a way that you can make it so it's very direct when you need it to be, but you can give a lot of freedom to the music system when it doesn't need to be so direct. And that's the holy grail for making adaptive music, to combine these
Mhm.
two. So it will actually, the goal is always, it's going to sound like it's written to your story. When it comes to sound effects, there's so many other things you have to think about. Not only I gave you some very simple examples, but also what happens if you hear something and it gets blocked by a bus or something like that. How will that sound react to that, and so on, and direction. And there's so many other things you have to think about when it comes to the audio part. But what the common thing between these two systems that will become one system is one big thing for us. We want to bring back the control. That's the thing. Uh, we started this company to bring back control to the composers. With the audio part, we want to bring back the control to the audio designers. The way it is today with a lot of systems, you design your sounds, but then you're completely in the hands of programmers in the studio. And I have heard so many horrible stories of what happens to to the sound in the end and so on. Actually, also with music. So you can download the game and you hear, well, all music is mono, and you call the studio and it's mono. Yeah, we know we ran out of space. And then maybe you
Yeah.
just hire the biggest studio in the world just to mix it correctly. And so we wanna solve that. We want to bring back control to the creators. If it's music or a sound, that's doesn't matter.
Do you guys maybe have like a favorite example, or maybe a couple of games that are using sound and music in very interesting, creative ways?
Yeah, there's so many. Of course, I have a lot of examples of games using Elias, but if I take examples that are not using Elias, um, what is this? The Witcher 3. I saw this fantastic presentation of that, how the music was made, and all the limitations they had, and still made it was still a great adaptive score. And it was a very funny presentation also, because the way they had to solve it, everything had to be in A minor. For instance, they couldn't change key, but that was one limitation, and so on. So they said, the composers, I can't hear A minor anymore because it's so.
Mhm.
They worked for a long time, uh, and hearing all their limitations, I knew that, well, this is why Elias exists, because I love their enthusiasm, and their they really wanted to make this great, and they succeeded. But they would have succeeded so much faster with a intelligent system. Um, But then again, I could just a simple thing. I rather listen to the music of Super Mario 1 than some of the new games coming out, since Super Mario is actually adaptive. The simple things like you're running out of time and the music goes faster. These extremely simple things you do with music is more powerful than hiring London Symphonic Orchestra for a static score, I think.
I remember with Witcher 3 that you mentioned, like the main joke about it was that whenever you enter the building, there is a lady with this tambourine starting shooting and crying because they had this sample where there was like a female vocal and like a very high note.
Ah,
And she was kind of, everybody was joking about that. Yeah, but
they
I
actually
agree
have
that
great musicians in that game. I have to, yeah, it's probably a really good singer.
yeah, I mean the music there is great, and when you talk about another, like if I need to think about another example of music in a game where it really kind of blends, I don't know, like it's part of the game, you don't really notice it to an extent, and then it's kind of like becomes another layer in this world. I think it's Skyrim. I think
Yeah,
Skyrim they did a tremendous job because I've been playing it not that long ago, and I was like, you cannot put it out of the game. If you put the music out of the game, it loses like 90% of its charm. Like
yeah,
it's just like it's flat then, and then you
yeah,
kind of go in, and there's like from different like parts of it, and it changes all the time, right? From one area to the next, like from one encounter to the next encounter, from like one quest to the other. Like this is like what um kind of like the power of guess music in video games is, right? Because it's so kind of like you said, it's kind of in the background, but it
mm,
influences you and all of your experiences and adventure. That's why it's so powerful. So
mm.
since you guys are kind of connected with composing and all that stuff, I kind of need to ask you this: when do developers when should developers start thinking about music in their games? So when is a good time? Because in majority of cases, they don't really think about it. They think about mechanics, the
Mm.
visuals, all those other things. The monetization, music is something that's left kind of like in the field.
Yeah, for me, I kind of have two answers to it. I just I made the music for It Takes Two, Haze-like game recently, and that was a very special project because every level in that game is unique. So it's a new music style every level and so on. So we had to start really really early to make that. I think we did 13 hours of music in that game. It's kind of a record, I think. But on the other hand, as a composer, you would like to do it last because everything is done. You want to see the complete. Like in films, it's really annoying if you do music for a film. I've actually experienced this. I did music for a whole film, and then they told me, "Well, we just edit it again," and I had to redo everything because as a composer for a film score, you actually are exact down to a frame. So it's kind of the same thing with the game. You want to come in later than the others, but not too late. uh, so it's hard. It depends on the game project, of course. If you have really good prototypes, yeah, if you have really good um, uh, story, if you can imagine the game really good in the early stage, then you want to go in early.
I know there are different examples. There are guys who are, I mean, programming and music, it's kind of like close because it's all kind of math in a
Yeah,
way.
yeah,
And I know a lot of developers are actually composing music for their own games. Like a very good examples would be Stardew Valley. So he actually built he created the graphics, the engine, and he also built the music for the title. But sometimes when it's a very big production, when there's a lot of people involved, they don't really have the music in the beginning, right? When they're doing vertical slice, on when they're doing a prototype or something. And what they're trying to do is they're using temp music. They're using temp tracks, temporary tracks. And there is a lot of debate on this. So a lot of people are saying that it's a horrible thing to do. So what's your take on it? Do you feel like this is a solution, or you should move away from it? Like, how do you solve this?
I could say this: you have to have the right composer for the vertical slice. 100% sure. So anytime after that, it's too late. But then I think you can. It depends if it's going to be. If you know you're going to have a real symphonic orchestra, there's a lot of work with the scoring and everything. So then you need to come in very very early. The only thing why I'm a little bit like this is sometimes you experiment a lot when you do a game. You're moving in one direction, and if you, as a composer, put too much love into that, let's say this is a space game, and you put all your energy into writing music for this, and then suddenly they say, well, it's going to be underwater. Actually, very strange example maybe, but it's hard to as a composer just leave the first idea that you had. That is why I think in Hollywood it's very very when you do movies and you have the spotting session, that is a very important tool, that the composer actually look at the movie for the first time and almost done movie. They want him to wait until that because too early you can start common things that isn't really the core thing of the story and things like that. But it's a balance. It's a balance. You should never wait until the game is completely finished, of course, but maybe not in the start as well. So
yeah,
I can say
go
just
ahead,
I mean it's both for composers but also for sound designers. Always the feedback we get is very much that they come in a little bit too late and have too little time to produce something of the quality they have the ambition to do. So it's important for us to enable them to get in as early as possible in the process in different ways. One thing is to be able to try out your content even before it's integrated into the game.
if you have a system where you can use, say you use temp music, but it's at least the temp music for the right composer, then you don't have to start from scratch after the vertical slice, for instance. So
Yeah, I think the main complaint with temp music and what Andreas mentioned, when you're using maybe temp effects or something and just download it from the library to play around, is that they stick. So even when you finally decide that you don't want to do this, like you want another effect, but in your head, director, producer, game programmer, everybody, they already heard that music. They already heard that effect. They're kind of married to it. And what you end up doing, you're creating kind of something similar, right? So it's not really originality. And there is a very good case about it for music in Marvel films, where they kind of launched the like there is a scene in the first Iron Man where Tony Stark is building the suit, and there is like this minimal kind of like techno or something that's going in the background. And then in every other scene, in every other movie, they have the same music with little bit of variations, kind of like it just feels like such a shame when people are investing these billions of dollars in these franchises and they're doing this crazy CGI, and then they don't, which is not true, right? Obviously there are talented composers and talented people who are working on it, but they are not giving like the creative freedom to kind of do whatever they want just because of the temp, because it's kind of already narrowed things down, and you can't go outside it. I think that the software that your guys are building and providing is especially valuable for games, because in games it's all about iteration. Like you said, you can start in space and you might end up underwater, and that's normal. That's just video games.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have this flexibility and just opportunity to iterate all the time. I think that's kind of like the key in any kind of product that's doing sound design for games.
Yeah, and you're onto something, because the product that we will release soon, which is a combined project with the music system, we're changing a lot of things in the music system, because it could be like this when you do video gaming, you think about the music, and they could say like, oh, we don't have time to make it truly adaptive, let's just make normal stereophile musics. And in all of these cases, if you at least you can also do that in our technology, but you can put in your simple music in the game, and then when you feel like maybe a little bit more complicated here, and you add something, and then you are starting to building the adaptive music, instead of taking a really big decision early on that is going to be completely adaptive. Then it might scare you. So I don't know how you said it, but it's very important to experiment in the same technology that will stick in the end of the game, that it's scalable, if you will.
Okay, guys, we're kind of already at the end of the session. I have two more questions. So, the first question is, how do we, like, if somebody wants to try this Alias 3.3 or your next product, where do you go? Like, do you have an official website? Do you sell it anywhere on like Steam or somewhere? And how much is the software? What's the license? And those kind of questions.
The answer to the first question is very easy. Just go to elias.com, and you will see the release, and in that release,
eliassoftware.com. Sorry.
sorry,
Yeah.
eliassoftware.com, and you can just download Elias 3.3, and that is a complete product. It's been around for a long time, and this is the update, and it works in Unity and Unreal and wherever you want it to work. And it's free to use as a composer. With Harmony, you can download this. This is the first beta of Harmony. You can download it for Windows, and it works in Unity and Unreal as well. And download the demo level and so on. So that's really easy. It's just a couple of clicks away. That's a completely different thing, because it very much depends on what game you're talking about and what studio and so on. So our license differs a lot from small indie games up to AAA big games. So it's negotiations with us, and you can pay up front, or you can have a rev share deal.
You do rev share, right? So
yeah, if you want that, we can. We do that.
How does it work? So you get a percentage from every sale of the game in perpetuity, or to a certain?
Yeah. It could be every sale of the game, or it could be engagement, how many users daily, and things like that. It depends on if it's what kind of game it is, actually, because we have freemium as well. We just start playing the game, so it's you have to base it on what kind of project it is. But of course, rev share is very, very attractive for indies and startups and so on, just to try the software.
Yeah, but if you end up doing music for like Amanas, then you're basically set for life. You don't have to worry about that anymore.
Normally, you have some kind of roof, of course, so that
roof.
So you don't have but we
I get it.
We when we started Elias, we said that we were going to have a really clear fixed model, and then we realized, okay, there's no really clear fixed games. So how? So I think we have have very different deals for different studios, and that's just the way it is for us and all other middleware companies, I think.
Interesting. Okay, and the last question is, so out of all the composers who work in games, who are like your favorite ones? Who would you recommend listening to kind of understand that how complex and interesting the music for games can be?
Oh, there's so many.
You can name like a couple. Don't have to go
Yeah,
like
Gary Scheinman,
hugely.
and of course the one I'm always mentioning, and it just flew out of my head, but I can mention Martin Parby again. Why can't I remember? Andreas, can you help me? Do you have any?
This is your field. I'm just a tech guy.
It's my field.
No, but some good
Well,
things.
I'm completely blank now. But
That's
let's say
fine.
I think maybe if you want to
Robert
mention
Lundgren.
like classics is this what was it, Monkey Island?
Yeah,
That's always referred to when it comes to adaptive music.
yeah. But
I don't remember the music though.
I have to mention Robert Lundgren, who did the music for Mutant Year Zero. It's a really great adaptive game music composer. So check him out.
I got you.
Or
Okay, guys. Well,
Andreas Kinger. I can now. I just remember all of them.
cool. Well, guys, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for spending this hour with us. It was a very interesting conversation. I hope we will have you, on our podcast maybe in sometime, maybe in a year or something, so we can discuss your next releases and new stuff that you have in the pipeline.
Absolutely.
Sounds great.
Thank you so much for. And now I remember Jason Graves was the name I
Okay. Cool.
Right,
We'll
but
leave the links in the description so you can check out the website and download the demos and play around with it. So
super.
right.
It was so nice
Thank
to be
you
here.
for joining, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for enjoying another episode of the 80 Level Roundtable podcast. Check out upcoming episodes on the 80 Level website at 80.lv. Join our career site at 80.lv/RFP. And share our podcast with friends and on your social networks.